The New York Giants not only got themselves a dominant pass rusher, they also may have gotten themselves a young franchise quarterback of the future. We'll talk about it, as well as what they may do today in day 2 of the NFL Draft. Next on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Big Blue Breakdown Live. I'm Paul Dottino. So glad you could join us at this very early hour. Sleep? Who needs sleep? I got about a 3-hour nap by the time I got done with everything last night at the New York Giants facility. Got done with all the wrappings and trimmings of the first round of the draft, knowing that you guys this morning, maybe you didn't all stay up so late, or maybe even if you did, I figured you would want to be itching to not only chat about the Giants first round, but maybe give us a phone call or maybe give us a video call. Don't be shy. Don't be bashful. This is very odd for us, right? To be on at 8 o'clock in the morning, New York time. But I figured, you know what? Let's get you while you're waking up. Let's get you while your emotions are raw. A lot of people were tired, went to bed last night, figured, all right, the day is over. It's been a long one. But this is your chance. All right? This is your chance. Before any of the local radio stations get to your phone calls, we can talk to you right here. As you see at the bottom of the screen, there is a link right there. If you want to give us an audio call or a video call, please, by all means, do. And, of course, our chat is active right there on the right side of your screen. All right, folks, so let's recap it, because in about 15 minutes, we will be joined by NFL draft expert Ric Serritella. He is from All Access Football and was the creator of the NFL Draft Bible, which first was established back in 2002. So he's been putting out this publication for over 20 years. One of the draft experts here in the New York market who has been doing it for an awfully long time. So when he pops on at about 8:15, we'll see. Maybe he'll be willing to take some of your comments and some of your calls as well. But he's going to pop on at 8:15. We will review what went on last night in a thumbnail, but also talk about what the Giants might be doing in rounds 2 and 3 tonight. Now, as you probably are aware, at the moment, they don't have a second-round pick, because pick number 34, as well as pick number 99, near the end of the third round, and next year's third-round pick, well, they were sent to the Houston Texans late last night as the Texans were on the clock with pick number 25. In exchange for those 3 selections, the Giants used the 25th pick in the draft to take Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. The connections to Dart are from here to the moon. You talk about the fact that Ole Miss, well, there have been 3 phenomenal Ole Miss quarterbacks in school history. He broke all the records of 2 of them, Archie Manning and his son, Eli Manning. He's known Eli since he was in high school, went to the Manning passing camp. Charlie Weiss, former Giants running backs coach, his son is the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. Joe Judge, the former Giants head coach, is an assistant down there at Ole Miss with the Rebels. And Joe Shane, the Giants general manager, his daughter attends Ole Miss. The Giants have had detailed research on Jackson Dart for quite a long time. Their intel was about as deep and as accurate as you're ever going to find if you're going to take a stab at a quarterback. Now, we could talk more about him later, but I just want to give you a big overall picture as to how the events folded last night. Because as you all do know, because it was early enough in the evening, the Giants at the number 3 selection went with Abdul Carter. Now, here's what's funny about it, right? We've known for quite a long time, and I mean quite a long time, that the Tennessee Titans were going to take Cam Ward at number 1. This was pretty obvious, kind of from the smoke that trailed the combine. And so that was kind of out of the picture. Tennessee was going to get locked into Cam Ward. You knew that. So the question was, what would Cleveland do? Was there any chance that they would peel off the guy who many felt was the number 1 player in the draft, Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner, receiver and corner out of Colorado? Well, Cleveland decided, we're not going to take Travis Hunter. We're going to make a deal to get a slew more picks. Maybe their strategy was to try to trade up somewhere else in the draft. Who knows? Or maybe they just wanted a slew of picks thinking that they could improve their roster. So they traded out with the Jacksonville Jaguars at 5. Now, Giants general manager Joe Schoen said it was a couple of days ago when they really had a good sense that something was brewing there and a deal was going to occur. So what happened? Well, Jacksonville did pull the trigger on the deal with the Cleveland Browns. And wouldn't you know it? They took Travis Hunter. The guy who was supposed to go at 2 all along to Cleveland winds up going to Jacksonville. And so then the Giants get on the clock at 3. And it was pretty obvious with the best player available on the board philosophy. Well, Abdul Carter, the edge rusher out of Penn State, was that guy. Everybody knew that Hunter and Carter, or Carter and Hunter, were 1 and 2, 2 and 1 as the best overall talented players on the board in this draft. And so the Giants took Abdul Carter. Now, what did we learn about this 6'3", 250-pound pass rusher who is estimated to have run a time at under 4.5? In fact, 4.48, I believe, is the hand clocking he has been given. 12 sacks last year. Played off-ball linebacker for the first 2 years at Penn State until he moved to edge rusher. Now, what do we know from Joe Schoen's presser last night? Well, first of all, he said it became a very easy decision as the process went along. And after all, that's because after Hunter and Carter, there was a gap to the next level of talent in the draft. This is why people talk about the philosophy of best player available. He had seen Carter play several times in person, and we've told you that Joe Schoen is one of those road warriors when it comes to being a general manager. He does get out to games all the time. He must be racking up a lot of frequent flyer miles, I'll tell you that. He did say he spoke with teams up and down. Yeah, he admitted Cleveland and Tennessee before. They were higher. He said they did talk to those people up there just to get a feel. You do your due diligence. You find out what their price could be. And if all of a sudden it seems like they're giving you a really good deal, maybe you decide to move up. Because there was still a tiny bit of a possibility that Cleveland may go against the chalk and trade out, which is what they did. And who knows? Maybe they could have taken Abdul Carter, the pass rusher, or maybe the team that traded with them could have taken Carter. Who knows? That would have left the Giants Travis Hunter. If you go by the best player available scenario, then the Giants in all likelihood would have taken Travis Hunter. Clearly, the best player available philosophy is what the Giants employed with the number 3 pick. There was not a quarterback involved at 3. Once Cam Ward was locked in at number 1 with the Titans, you do your due diligence, you call, you find out, what are you guys thinking? How much would you charge to potentially maybe make a move there? But Tennessee wasn't having any of it. Their guy was Ward, and that was that. Much like last year, the Patriots weren't going to move out. They were all in on Drake May. Same situation. You call, you do your due diligence, you see if they're going to make a move. And if they're not making a move and they just say, look, we appreciate the phone call, have a great day, and they hang up. That's it. And you move on. And so quarterback was not in play for the Giants at 3, at least not by the best player available theory, which is what they followed. Now, in remaining draft picks for the Giants, just so you know, because they had to make the deal to move up into the bottom of the first round, which of course gives them now the right to sign Jackson Dart to a 4-year contract. And then before that 4th season, they could pick up a 1-year option at a standard rate as determined by the NFL. So that's why people talk about the potential 5th-year option when you draft a player in the first round. It's the only round that the NFL allows that variant, if you will, in the contract. The Giants still have pick number 63, which is the first pick in the 3rd round. I have no idea if they're going to try to move up to get into the 2nd because pick number 34 was sent to the Texans. We'll see. But right now they have pick number 65, which is the first pick in the 3rd round. They will pick again as the 3rd selection in round number 4. That is at number 105. In the 5th round, they've got the 16th pick, which is number 154. That pick came by way of the Seattle deal for Leonard Williams, if you'll recall, a couple of years ago. 6th round, they have no picks. They had made an exchange of a 6th and 7th rounder for Boogie Basham, if you'll recall, going back to last year. So in the 7th, they have pick number 3, which is number 219, and pick number 30, which is 246. So the Giants do have 5 draft choices still remaining in this draft. Next year, they bit into the apple and did trade their 3rd rounder for the deal to get Dart with the Texans. So that's where it stands. 5 picks still to go. As it stands tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time, round 2 will start, and the Giants, at the moment, have only 1 pick this evening, and that will be the first pick of the 3rd round. Let me get to some of your comments, because this is really what the show's about, right? We are here for you. Breakfast and football as we talk New York Giants draft. Christine says, good morning, and a good morning to you, Christine. One of our regulars. Our show usually airs on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time here on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel and media network. Aiden Fink says, good morning. Good morning to you. Iman Perry says, morning edition. Dang, I know Paul didn't sleep. Sleep? Really? It was a nap, Iman. It was a nap. Dan says, good morning. Good morning to you. Bobby Clifton says, let's go, baby. I'm sensing a lot of positivity as the sun begins to shine along the East Coast. Jay Seward says, good morning. Great to see you. Back at you, Jay. Trenches from here on out. And I'm with you. That's one of the things we will talk about with Ric Serritella in just a couple of minutes. And yes, absolutely. The draft has terrific talent, defensive tackle and offensive line in the 3rd round. Defensive tackles, quite frankly, you could get some really good ones in the 4th. So we know the Giants could use some fortification at both of those spots. Also at corner. Jay, don't leave out corner, okay? In fact, Joe Shane mentioned he thought there was a lot of depth players at corner in this draft. I've talked to some draft experts who say, you know what, they feel it kind of thins out after the 3rd round. So don't be shocked if somewhere in these two picks, I would think, and again, you never pick for position. You want value to meet the slot. It seems pretty obvious that they're going to get value to meet slot, probably at defensive tackle and at offensive line in rounds 3 and 4. The question remains, if they really do want to get a corner, I don't know if you could go to round 5 to do that. All right, before we get to more of your chats, it is time to bring in our guest this morning. Friend of mine, known him for a number of years. You guys know him as the man who created the NFL Draft Bible. Yep, just like Moses parted the Red Sea, this guy came down from the hills and created the NFL Draft Bible back in 2002. That's over 20 years ago. He is Ric Serritella from All Access Football. And Rick, it is so good to see you this morning. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Breakfast with football.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here with you, Paul. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with a little kegs and eggs on day 2 of the NFL draft.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. All right. So let's get right to it. Folks, I've looked at the NFL Draft Bible, as many of us have for many, many years. And so, Rick, it comes as no surprise to me that you had Abdul Carter right up there with Travis Hunter. And so I'm going to guess you like the value of the Giants pick at number 3.
Oh, absolutely, Paul. I mean, you're right. I had Carter, Hunter, kind of 1A and 1B blue chip. Tyler Warren was kind of in that range for me as well. So listen, anytime you can stockpile blue chip talent at one of the most important positions in football, getting after the quarterback, you got to love it. And you look right in the division what the Cowboys did with Micah Parsons, kind of a similar path for Abdul Carter, a little bit of linebacker, transitions to the edge, shows explosive athleticism, tremendous twitch. I just reviewed my notes. He can bend like Gumby on the edge. You know, what can't he do? So now you take Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. I saw his 5th year is going to be renewed, which I think is a positive thing because all of these guys now can thrive, and opposing offenses have to pick your poison. You can't double team them all. And then you got Sexy Dexy that takes up some space. So I love the pick. Great value. And I'm sure we'll get into the other pick as well.
Yeah, we will talk about Jackson Dart in a moment, but I just want to go one thing back on Abdul Carter. Some of the folks who were a little resistant, and let's also make it clear, the Giants' medical checks obviously were okay on the foot, or they're not making this pick. I don't think any team that would have red flagged his stress reaction foot injury would have taken him at 3. So obviously there was no red flag. I mean, you got to watch it, but clearly he was alive on their board and they made the selection. But be that as it may, let's talk about for a second the fact that he was an off-ball linebacker for his first 2 years at Penn State, Rick, which to me should have allayed the fears of some folks who said, well, you got 2 edge rushers already. Why are you drafting a 3rd? I don't see any reason why Carter can't get on the field as a rookie and have a major impact and get a lot of snaps in conjunction with the other 2 guys.
No doubt about it. And if you just copy what the Eagles did with their blueprint and having the Giants NASCAR package back with their blueprint, and you see it's a formula for success. So, you know, it doesn't matter on paper the GS stat. I don't care who starts. You're getting the best talent available. You're keeping legs fresh. You're increasing the level of competition, right? Because you think these guys don't want to outdo each other. So listen, Thibodeau now, this is going to light a little bit of a fire under his hiney, I would think, right? Hey,
sure.
Time to step your game up. So, you know, I think that you got to be a little bit careful because I see a guy like Isaiah Simmons who's gone through the car wash and nobody's really been able to create a defined role. Now, I think Abdul Carter is a way superior talent, right? But I do think, like, hey, his strength is getting after the quarterback. I'd like to see him maximize that. But you're absolutely right. Like, He could play linebacker. He could be an edge rusher. He could be a chess piece. And maybe that rookie season, you kind of place him in mismatch situations, feel him out, and then define his role. And sometimes injuries have a funny way of playing these things out as well.
Don't say that. Not
Well,
with all of the injuries that have happened to the Giants.
Gets injured, Paul. Come on, it happens.
I think the guys in East Rutherford know that all too well. Now, when I read your review and your scouting report on Jackson Dart, I think it was rather interesting because you placed him at number 4 on your quarterbacks list. Mm-hmm. But in your description, you had him higher as a first-round guy going into the season. Then maybe you didn't like some things that you saw, but you also made very specific mention of the fact that he had some really, really good traits that will translate to the NFL game. And so I'm guessing you kind of fought yourself as to where exactly you wanted to put him.
Well, it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and I followed Jackson Dart very closely throughout his whole career, but specifically, Paul, this past year, because coming into the season, I had predicted Ole Miss to win the national championship and for Jackson Dart to win the Heisman Trophy. So he came into the season as a first-round grade for me. I loved what I saw because he had the ability to make all the throws. He also has the athleticism to scramble and extend plays and make off-platform throws. Right. So when you talk about what translates to the next level, that's what I saw in Jackson Dart. Okay. Now, he did go through quite a bit of adversity. Right. And so I would compare it to when Will Levis had these high expectations coming into Kentucky. And people forget he played so well, he got Liam Cohen fired as the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. Well, I had my expectations up here for Jackson Dart. Right. And so I knew I was coming on. I pulled up the box score to recollect my memory because, like, if you look at his performance, Paul, right, out of the gates, they come out like a barnstormer. They go 4-0, Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern. Lights it up, 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Outstanding. Okay, did what he's supposed to do. First SEC game, they go into a lead against Kentucky, and, Dart just couldn't get the offense going in the fourth quarter. It stalled, plenty of opportunities to will his team to victory, couldn't pull it out. Okay, 2 weeks later, they go up against LSU. I said, wow, Grant Nussmeier, ranked opponent, first ranked defense they face all season. Again, they go into the fourth quarter with a lead. And he just got out-dueled by Grant Nussmeier, double overtime, I think it was. And you walked away saying, wow, Nussmeier was the guy that was the gamer. And so, 2 ranked opponents. Georgia they beat, but statistically speaking, it was one of his worst performances of the season. And then late in the year, they had an opportunity still to get back into the college playoff hunt. And he just puts up a whopper against Florida, who was terrible last year, 2 crucial interceptions, and he took a lot of sacks. The game against LSU, 6 sacks. The game against Florida, 4 sacks. So when the big moment stage or the spotlight was on him, I just didn't think Jackson Dart delivered when it mattered most. Now, I love the fit in New York because he's not stepping into a situation where he has to start right away, right? He's got the ultimate consummate professional in Russell Wilson on one side. He's got the loosey-goosey Jameis Winston, nothing roll off the back on the other end. So he's going to get a great combination of how to prepare. And listen, it's remarkable when you think about it. There's this stigma around Lane Kiffin quarterbacks, from Matt Barkley to Matt Corral. Like, he's never had a first-round quarterback, and it's just unfathomable to think about it that there's this stigma, but I don't label him that way. I think playing for Lane Kiffin and the offensive coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr. there, if you're looking for a Giants connection, is a good thing. And
Joe Judge, too.
Joe Judge, yeah. So, listen, I think that I also wrote down here at the Combine, they said, which quarterback do you compare yourself to? And he said Jalen Hurts. So you talk about the dual threat. I'll tell you, Paul, what stood out to me that was most impressive that I didn't know going into the process when we were down in Mobile, and he was in that quarterback group, and you saw Riley Leonard, his ability to scramble and the physicality of a Riley Leonard. But then when I saw Dart up close next to Milroe and Leonard, it was his frame that was thick and more impressive than them all. And I thought that was a really good thing as well.
You know what's interesting? I'm so glad you brought that up, Rick, because when I met him at the Combine, first thing I said to myself was he looks like a football player because he's sturdy. He's absolutely sturdy, and it shows when he takes off and runs with the ball. He doesn't look for the sideline right away and kind of wuss out. In some ways, and please, folks, don't say I'm comparing him to this guy, but that type of attitude and that type of physicality and trait reminded me of the toughness of Phil Simms, who, Bill Parcells used to say he's a football player. He's not a quarterback. I think Jackson Dart's a football player.
Agree. Yeah, no, I like that. And again, that's something that I wasn't expecting. And then when I saw it in person, I gave him some bonus points in my evaluation. Now, I like the pick. I think this is the ultimate combination because they added the best player available. And I felt like they needed some sense of optimism. I really wanted to see, because Russell is a hold the fort quarterback. Let's be real.
Right.
But Dart now is a sense of hope, optimism, and you don't have the pressure of him starting right away. You hand over the keys to the Cadillac when he's ready. And whether that's this year or next year, he's going to be that much better for it. And I think the NFL has gotten away from grooming quarterbacks. But if you look at the track record, it's kind of a better model for success if you can be patient, right? And I think the Giants now are in position to do that.
Yeah, the pro red shirt should give him a chance to polish up whatever it is that he's missing in his game. And I think one of the things that I found interesting, Rick, we talk all we want about just particular stats, but, it always was one of the things that Parcells looked for in terms of how does the guy progress each and every year from the time he was at USC and then the 3 years at Ole Miss. Every year, his completion percentage went up. Every year, his yards per attempt went up. Every year, his yards per completion went up. And he had a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. So while I appreciate, that people will say numbers and stats can do anything and prove any point that you want, when you see a consistent progression over each of the 4 years in the man's overall general performance, in terms of what he put up, that does tell you that he is taking to teaching, he understands coaching, and he's a willing participant to work at his craft.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that Bill Parcells formula. And game started, the win-loss record was also a criteria that he valued, and that's something that improved each season as well. Jackson Dart has all the tools. I think it's fascinating that personally, I had Shedeur Sanders rated ahead of him. So I think this is going to be one of the ultimate case studies in NFL draft history. And listen, you got to have conviction and you've got to feel comfortable with who you're working with. And I think the Giants did about as much homework as any organization out there because they were all over it. And they were out in Colorado during the season. They were down there at the Shrine Bowl, and they were all over Dart. They met with Milroe, and they felt most comfortable. And so I heard something to the effect that Joe Shane's son the night before the draft had posted a picture of Jackson Dart and then put his Instagram on private. So I guess the writing was on the wall.
Well, Joe's daughter goes to Ole Miss, so he was very familiar with a lot of the background that was around campus as well. So I'm sure that the intel between those guys, Charlie Weiss's son, Joe Judge, let's not forget there's some guy named Eli Manning in the building who is a Giants official ambassador who not only did he meet Jackson Dart when Dart was a teenager, but he had him at the Manning passing camp and has been keeping an eye on him and is, I don't want to say he's been a mentor because I don't think they've had a huge amount of contact, but enough. So I think with the amount of research that the Giants also had firsthand on Dart, you have to feel like they're very confident that they got their evaluations correct.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, listen, this is a investigative type of situation when you're trying to identify a franchise quarterback. You've got to do all the due diligence, and having that inside intel goes a long ways, right? Because you, as a college football player, when you're walking around campus, you're not thinking like, "Hey, well, Joe Shane's daughter attends here," but you're literally being evaluated, right? And you don't even know it.
Right.
And so that's why I say, like, when you go to the campus, you try to talk to the cafeteria workers, the trainers, the parking lot attendants, anybody who's had interaction with these people to see at the next level. It's really more of a mental thing. And I think that's where they felt comfortable with his DNA, what's between the ears, what's in here inside his chest. And you can never really fully gauge that. All you can do is try to assume it to the best of your ability by being around that individual and being around their entourage.
All right. Now, Rick, I do.
And
Ric
one last
Serritella,
thing, Paul, while you were talking,
yeah.
I was thinking this guy, of course, Eli Manning's been keeping tabs. I had 28 records, I think he broke at Ole Miss. He rewrote the record book down there. So
I wasn't going to go there, but I think that may have been one of the reasons why Eli had his binoculars out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Before we talk a little bit more about what the Giants may do coming up in the ensuing rounds, I do want to just reflect real quick, get a thumbnail for you from you on the first round. We knew Carter was expected to go very high. Dart, nobody knew exactly where he might go. Now, again, I know you had him as your fourth-rated quarterback on the board, but there were other teams who apparently, decided that they didn't want to make the plunge. But the Saints, we knew, were probably in the market for a QB. The Steelers were probably in the market for a QB. Cleveland could have been in the market to trade back into the first round like the Giants were. As it unfolded and Dart was slipping, how curious were you about the scenario that would finally wind up coming together?
Well, I had an inkling that the Giants were interested in Dart, so I knew that was a possibility. I thought the quarterback kind of carousel dominoes was interesting to watch it unfold. And I did feel like Dart was more pro. Like I had Milroe ahead of Dart because of the upside, but I thought Dart was the more pro ready right now. But yeah, I think the X factor here, Paul, is that Kirk Cousins had said he would be willing to waive his no trade clause after round one. And then it changed to that he was going to wait until see how day two unfolded because he just doesn't want to be put back in that babysitting role like he was a year ago with Michael Penix. And he goes to a team, they draft a signal caller in round two, and now he's just a stopgap again. But I do think there are some teams kind of holding out hope for Kirk Cousins, and it's like pick your poison. Do you want to go and overpay a veteran that you know what you're getting that has limited upside, or do you want to roll the dice on one of these younger guys? I think it'll be curious now. It'll be telling to see what Cleveland does at 33, because now you've eliminated the financial risk from taking a quarterback early. Hey, you need a quarterback, you take him here in round two. It doesn't work out, you can move on next year. There's really not going to be a financial anchor. If they bypass a quarterback here, I think it'll be very telling.
All right. Final question on the Dart situation. I don't want to just let this go without fulfilling all of the angles. The price that the Giants paid, they gave up the 34. They gave up the 99, which was the compensatory they got courtesy of the free agent signing by Green Bay for Xavier McKinney. And then they gave up a second rounder next year. Your thoughts on the price they paid to move up from 34 to 25? Of course, part of that, not only do you make sure you get the guy you want, but you also get the fifth-year option.
Yeah, I mean, and the fifth-year option is big. Listen, that's a nothing burger to give up those picks to get a potential franchise quarterback. When you're taking a quarterback in round one, and you don't have to give up additional first-round draft equity, I think that's a win, because obviously you have a belief that this guy is going to be your future starter. So if you feel like this is going to be the guy to carry your franchise, giving up those compensatory picks and second and third rounders, who cares? Because if the pick pans out, you're not even going to think about those picks, right?
Sure. Ric Serritella from the NFL Draft Bible and All Access Football joining us. Rick, you got a few more minutes. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna hang with Rick, folks. If you want to chime in, you can give us an audio call or a video call. We're gonna sit with Rick until he's got to go get the coffee pot going. So I appreciate you, Rick. Now hey, I got my OJ, and we're gonna continue talking Giants football until then. So coming up now, we have day 2 of the draft. The Giants at the moment, because of that deal for Dart, don't have a second rounder. They do have, however, the first pick of the third round at number 65. Just before you came in, I was chatting with some of our fans, and the value and the need to get a defensive tackle and maybe a quality offensive lineman and even potentially depth at corner looks like you could pretty much choose any one of those 3 positions. Your thoughts as to what the Giants might do in this spot?
Yeah, well, I caught some of the show before I popped on and heard you say that they got to keep it to the trenches, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think it's a great draft to do that. So I actually, from the interior on the offense and defensive side, I went back to the big board and who's going to be around available, possibly. So like Joshua Gray out of Oregon State. He's my number 57th player on the board. Started off as an offensive tackle, also played some center. I think his best true fit is at guard. He's technically sound. He's got great bend, footwork, fundamentals, a little bit of nasty chip on the shoulder. Joshua Gray, I think, is one of the most underrated players. Marcus Mabau out of Purdue. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. My number 57th ranked guy, so he might still be on the board. And what I like about him is he's a guy that plays through the whistle, and you love to have him on your team and you hate to face him, because all he did was get under the skin of opponents all week long. He just irritated the defenders. They couldn't get around him. He frustrated them. They were throwing their helmets. They were getting penalties, all because of the grit and toughness of Marcus Mabau. Also, Ellen Munor has inside-outside versatility. So, if they wanted to explore kicking him inside, and a guy like Ozzie Trapilio from Boston College was still there, Charles Grant out of William and Mary, I have those guys right in those range. So I think, fortifying that offensive line would be a priority. Now, if they want to go defensive side, Cam Jackson out of Florida, right? You can, you have this guy giving Dexter a blow. I have him as my number 65 overall player, actually. And the size and get off, he requires 2 teams. So if you stuck Cam Jackson now in between those edge rushers, boy, oh boy. I mean, he just makes everybody better. A couple other guys like Savion Jones too, out of LSU on the defensive side. He's got inside outside flexibility. Right. He showed the ability to rush the quarterback and play edge. I actually like him on the interior better, because I think he utilizes his speed and quickness better there. But I'm all about the interior. I can get into some cornerbacks who will be in that range as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, well, let's go there, because then I kind of want to ask you a little bit about 105, which will be the 4th round pick. But let's stick with the corner spot. Now, again, I happen to agree with you. I would rather go to the trenches with that pick in the 3rd round. And then in the 4th, you know what? If I go to the other side of the trenches, it's not a bad idea either. But we should touch on the corners, because Joe Schoen did mention that as a potential depth piece. He didn't think there were maybe many starters, but he thought there were a lot of depth in the reserves, if you will, at the corner spot. And the Giants could use a little bit of fortification there, because that spot in particular has been one that has magnetized a lot of injuries over the years.
Yeah, and you can never have enough depth in at the cornerback position. So let's take a look at Ohio State championship pedigree. Jordan Hancock,
Hmm.
6 foot, 186, ran a 4.42 40, 41 and a half inch vert. This guy's got incredible athleticism and versatility. He can play inside, he can play outside. So Jordan Hancock is a guy that I think is going to be right in that range. Um, Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane. Like, if you're just looking for depth and a special teamer on day two or round four, we talked about Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane is a guy. Now, here, Paul, is some interesting guys, and they could be there in round three. They could be there for round four. But I like guys who have starter traits, and they also have confidence. You got to have a short memory at the cornerback position.
Yes, you
And
do.
so, yeah, so two guys with size, pedigree, but a little bit of inconsistency would be Zy Alexander of LSU
Right.
and Denzel Burke out of Ohio State. Again, NFL teams like drafting players from championship programs.
Yeah.
Denzel Burke is a guy who started multiple seasons at Ohio State.
Hmm.
At one point was considered a first-round pick. Now, he got burnt like toast on some plays this past year. He got beat
Yes.
deep. Okay. Now that's a problem. But he has shown the potential to be a lockdown corner at times. So he's one of these guys where you watch the film and you say, man, that looks like a first round pick. Then you flip it on and he's getting beat for a 30-yard touchdown. Same thing with Zy Alexander. LSU has a pretty good track record of producing NFL caliber cornerbacks. The Giants are familiar with that. And so those are guys that I would probably target where you say, hey, these guys have starter traits. They're 4 and 5 star recruits for a reason. They've shown flashes of those potential. You take a guy and you say, coaches, you figure it out, right?
I want to ask you about Burke for just a second, because I thought that his inconsistencies this year, especially on some of those big plays, might wind up dropping him. Is there any way do you think that the Giants could sniff him at 105 at the top of the fourth?
Yes, I do, because I have a 4th-round grade on him. And, you have tremendous depth. You talk about guys getting pushed down the board, too. Like Azariah Thomas from Florida State, poor 40 time. Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, Siobhan Revel from ECU, medical concerns.
Yeah.
These were like potential first-round guys now
Right.
that are getting pushed down the board. Darian Porter from Iowa State, Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, Za Frazier from UTSA. Like, all these guys have to come off the board before you get to a Denzel Burke. So I think there's a realistic possibility.
All right. So now, while you and I would not do this, there are a lot of folks who think that once you get to the third round, you start to get to the sweet spot of the running back core, which is going to be really good. Rick, people are going to be excited about these backs. Now,
Yeah.
personally speaking, if I had the Giants running back room, I would want a hammer. I would love to have a guy like Scatterbo. I would love to have a kid from Oklahoma State,
Ollie Gordon.
Ollie Gordon.
Yep.
But most of these backs are not those kinds of backs. Most of these backs have quicks, some jukes, some speed, catch the ball. I'm after the power. I want the hammer. So how would you feel if the Giants dipped into the running back room and decided, okay, is there somebody there who you feel would be really good for them and worth actually possibly passing on a corner or one of the guys on the defensive line or the offensive line? Or do you just say, you know what? We'll just forget the third and fourth rounds. If we like a back, we'll take them in the fifth.
I would hold out and wait as long as I possibly can. There might be an exception, like Cam Scatterbo would intrigue me.
Yeah.
Because I think he can elevate, right? That to me is the guy. Like, you watch him against Texas And he looked like Earl Campbell. I mean, he ran through him, he ran over him, around him. It was incredible what he did as a one-man gang. So I think you need to really take a guy that you say, all right, you know what? This guy can clearly upgrade the backfield. And like some of these other, bigger backs, and Ollie Gordon, Damian Martinez out of Miami is another bigger back. You got the Clemson kid, Maffa, late in the round, Rocket Sanders out of South Carolina. Like all these guys are going to be hanging out. Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. So I would prefer to wait at the running back position. I thought about it, and the one guy that like made me pause was Scatterboo.
I know.
Wow. Well, that could be intriguing, right?
Yeah, Scatterboo and Gordon are the two backs that would make me hesitate. And maybe,
here, Gordon, you got to be careful because he had a DUI where he was speeding 20, 30 miles over the speed limit with the DUI. So you got to be careful with that one. And he might be there on day 3 because of that, right?
Yep. Actually, I was kind of hoping, you mentioned Mafe. I was kind of hoping he might be maybe even a 6th rounder. And I got another real sleeper back who fits that description. Again, I'm looking for a sledgehammer. The Bulldozer, Khalil Mullings out of Michigan, who only had 1 year as a starter this past season. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his tires. And you know what, Rick? He delivers the hammer against defensive players. He doesn't have great measurables. He's not going to excite anybody with his speed. He's not breaking 55-yard touchdowns. But if you need a short yardage back or a guy who's going to pound it out in the 4-minute, I think Mullings would be terrific as a late value.
Yeah, 6'1", 226. I think he gets dinged a little bit because he did not test, I believe. I think he had an injury of some sorts. He had to kind of opt out of the All-Star game, couldn't work out at the Combine or Pro Day. He actually was the backup going into the season and then won the starting job from Donovan Edwards, right? And so, that's a good call by you. I mean, listen, if you want to between the tackles, bruising back, you could get him maybe with your last pick, maybe in the even undrafted free agent range because this draft is so dang deep looking at it.
Yeah, I would love that. By the way, the other position that a lot of people were excited about at the Combine was tight end. Now, I get that. And again, the question becomes, John on BBKL, when we do the show during the day, he told me a number of times, I don't know that I could pass on all of these tight ends. There's so many good ones that at some point, don't you just have to take one because they're very rich? Yeah. I don't think I could break my philosophy of sticking with the trenches and getting a good corner or maybe getting a good running back to reach for a tight end. How do you feel? Is there such sweetness there that you could be tempted?
I think that there's one guy who could slide is Elijah Arroyo from Miami.
Right.
Who's got some wheels now. Like in terms of on the field, he's got a little Aaron Hernandez flair to him. 1 year wonder, had all of 6 catches coming into the season and then exploded onto the scene. He might be the fastest tight end in this year's class. I don't know where he falls because of the past injury history and what those medicals look like and the 1 year wonder. All of that weighs into the evaluation. I think that's the one guy I would make the exception to the rule. Like, Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon would be tempting, but I would prefer to build from the inside out because then I'm looking at a guy like Luke Lachey from Iowa who's coming off an ACL. He'll be 2 years removed from that injury, used to be discussed as a first-round pick. Right. Great pass catcher, inline blocker, Iowa
father's pedigree too.
Yeah, so that you could still get a guy like that on day 3. I think I was on with John. He mentioned Thomas Fedone from Nebraska would be hanging out at that stage of the game. So I'm all about building in the trenches. You can't have enough depth, size. That's what wins football games. I can find a tight end. And Theo Johnson, I thought, showed a lot of promise. So really, I mean, at that stage, you're drafting a complementary piece. No, let me go get a starter.
Let me go back into your archives just a little bit here, Rick, because Russell Wilson has gone out of his way to mention Greg Dulcich,
Yeah.
who he played with while he was with the Denver Broncos. Now, he was pretty highly thought of when he came out of school, Dulcich was, and has been injured. And
Yeah.
finally, the Broncos gave up on him after a couple of years. But he did play with Russell Wilson in Denver, and Wilson has mentioned his name now twice in conversations that I've heard since he got to the Giants. Is there a sleepy diamond in the rough here that there's something that maybe we don't know about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got to try to catch lightning in a bottle with guys like this. Now, you're right. The injury bug is what's gotten him in terms of his pro career. But coming out of UCLA, size, route runner, good hands, capable blocker. Russell Wilson's comfortable with him. So there's that familiar element, which is great. But, availability is still your best ability, right? So
I know.
He's got to prove that, he can stay healthy. Training camp, can't make the club in the tub, got to stay on the field. But, these are the kind of guys that he was taken relatively high, I believe, within the top 100 range. So you try to catch lightning in a bottle. And I'll tell you what, if he's healthy, like that's a great 1-2 dynamic, underrated tight end punch, because I only thought Theo Johnson grew as the weeks wore on. Like his best football is ahead of him. Now you throw Dulcich in there, run a little 12 personnel. I think he's a red zone mismatch weapon as well. So I like Dulcich. I'm a fan, but you got to stay healthy.
Yeah. So maybe we just keep him out of the corner of our eye for the time being.
Keep him on
I want
ice.
to ask you what. Yeah. Let me, by the way, also just go back and ask you about Tay Banks, because I loved him coming out of Maryland, and I thought he had a solid rookie season, made rookie mistakes, but he showed a lot of potential and a lot of talent. And then last year as a sophomore, it just didn't connect for him very well. Your thoughts on him before we go any further, because quite frankly, if it stays the way it is and the Giants don't add to the quarterback room, he needs to be starting opposite Paulson Adebo.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the little bit of the roller coaster ride at Maryland. Is he was a little bit of a streaky performer, has all the traits, the skill sets that you look for, and I think it's just going to really come to his maturation, preparation, and again, just the coaching, getting that out of him and maximizing that potential. But he's got the skill set to succeed, and it's all there. It's really about, I think, the mental aspect and preparation of him just taking that next step.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and that's why I thought he was worth the pick when they got him. I thought it was a really fine pick, and he's just got to make sure that he can, bust out, as they say, in year 3 of his NFL career. Rick, before we let you go, because I know you probably do want to get to your bacon and eggs, but I appreciate it.
I got to do my day 2 mock draft, Paul.
I know. I'm going to pin you down. Before we let you go. I want your pick for the Giants at 65. The card's going up to the board, and we've had a lot of people telling us on the chat they love what we're doing here this morning, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you getting up early to do this for me. Give me the guy you would really like to zero in on, maybe one realistic guy, and then maybe one guy for them who it might be a little bit of a hope because you think he'll go sooner. But if you could hold on to a 4-leaf clover, he might drop to you.
Well, the guy that I would really love to fall, I have a 2nd-round grade on him, is Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be the ideal situation because, I mean, this guy fires out of his stance like a cannon, plays low to the ground, really violent hands, was in great shape, because conditioning was a concern coming into the season, but he looked great in Mobile, 35-inch arms, 84-inch wingspan, right? This guy has length. He's got agility. So Joshua Farmer would be my dream scenario for the Giants. Like I said, the trenches, Cam Jackson would be right there, more realistic.
Okay.
You know, we mentioned him, but I think at this stage of his career, if you can give Dexter Lawrence a blow at times and, just kind of put him in between those pass rushers, Cam Jackson at 6'6", 328 pounds,
Yeah.
34-inch arms, like you can't move this guy, right? So I would like to see them just continue to now take a strength and continue to strengthen it, because now you take Cam Jackson, this is your identity. You're built around the defensive line. That's what's keeping up offensive coordinators late at night. How do we stop all these guys?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, Rick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Tell the folks where they can get your stuff and follow you throughout the course of the next few days. And of course, many days beyond that, because before you know it, it's going to be time for April 2026.
It's unbelievable. We've got the 2026 preview right now flowing over on allaccessfootball.com. You can still get the 2025 NFL Draft Bible. I printed out mine right here. It's 355 pages, and you get all that great intel, the medical, the background, the measurements, the interviews. And yeah, we're talking NFL Draft year-round, so I'll be doing the pregame show later on today at 5 p.m. Eastern time. You can follow us on X at NFL Draft Bible, and appreciate it. You're one of the most well-respected individuals working in the media, Paul. I am so happy to be here. You're one of my favorite people to talk football with, because literally you are such a professional and so knowledgeable. And when I want to go to the real pulse of the Giants' heartbeat, I say, well, what did Paul Dottino say? I'm out here talking about Shedeur Sanders. I go listen to you and John and say, oh, well, you know what? It's Abdul Carter. And I'll tell you one other thing. When Joe Shane was talking at the press conference and they asked him about the Abdul Carter injury specifically, I noticed the grin that he couldn't conceal. I don't know if you caught that during the presser, but he had this grin when he was talking about Abdul Carter Jr., and I thought that was an inkling too. But man, so happy to be here. It's the best time of the year. So enjoy the day 2 festivities. I'm sure we'll be chatting soon, and I'll be seeing you out there on the field, Paul.
Ric Serritella from All Access Football and the NFL Draft Bible. Again, my friend, feeling is mutual, and I will see you soon. Enjoy the rest of the draft. Great stuff. He's the man, Ric Serritella. I can't tell you how much I enjoy talking to Rick, because, we usually have him on during the course of the Combine on the Big Blue Kickoff live show. John and I will always invite him over there, and that's how I first met Rick many years ago. And, of course, I do college football games for the Northeast Conference in the FCS division, and got to know Rick through that too, as he used to come to games and scout some of those games as well. And so what a pleasure to have him on. Breakfast and football here this morning. Folks, thank you so much. We are well over 1,000 live views right now on the program. I really want to give you guys a chance now. So I wanted Rick to come on and give you as much information as we possibly could regarding what happened and what could happen. And now I want to hear from you. It's your chance now to opine, comment, whatever it is that you'd like to talk about. Hit us up on the chat. Hit us up on an audio call or a video call. Let me throw out that link again over there in the chat box over on the side. You could always, of course, hit us up at the bottom of the screen. You see the link is also showing up right there, and I will type this up to call via audio or video. And there you go. There it is over there. If it's a little bit easier for you to cut and paste it in that regard, we can certainly take you that way. All right, let's get to our chats, because I know we backed you up just a bit, folks. but I'd like to think we answered a lot of the things that you were curious about while we had Ric Serritella on. Jay Seward, we stopped with you before, and you said trenches from here on out. I think you've heard what Rick and I both said. I think the depth of this draft in the trenches in the third and fourth rounds, it's kind of like a beefsteak tomato. There's a lot to really like there. So yeah, that's really where I want to go. But I'm also with Rick. If I got tempted by a back, specifically a power back, which is what I desperately would love to see added to the running back room, Scatterboo. Oh my goodness, Cam Scatterboo from Arizona State. That's the one guy who could probably make me take that plunge. Maybe, I don't know. I might back off anyway. I don't know. But Scatterboo is so intriguing. But again, Ollie Gordon. I'm a big Gordon guy, and I am a Moldozer guy as the sleeper later on. All right, Sid Steinberg says, I am in wait and see on Dart. I love the Carter pick. Looks good. Iman Perry says, Dable don't want Dart. You can see it in his face. Eman, I got to be honest with you. That couldn't be further from the truth. The Giants had Dart as their second-rated quarterback on the board. They had unbelievable amounts of intel for him. And believe me, Dable was right in the heart of that decision-making process. And yes, he is very pleased with Jackson Dart. Now, you do make a comment here, and this is interesting. They didn't have to trade up. Dart would have been there at 34. The question there is, what happens if somebody else had the same thought the Giants had? We know that there were other teams looking for a QB. Cleveland, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, right? These teams were obviously looking to add a QB. And at any time, any of those folks might have been working the phones trying to get themselves an opportunity to move up. Now, maybe they were looking for Dart. Maybe they were looking for Sanders, and they couldn't get a deal done with anyone. Joe Shane actually told the Giants media last night at the press conference that they started getting down there to 20, and he started making some calls, and people didn't want to move. And then they finally were able to find a taker in the Houston Texans at 25. So we don't know what the competition was for other teams trying to jump into the bottom of the first round. Now, talking about Papa, the play-by-play voice of the Giants last night, you know, he also is a host on Sirius XM NFL Radio. Bob had said last night that, when you saw what happened with the Giants in Houston, right after the Giants made their pick, immediately the Rams at 26 went and traded out. And Bob had said he had been of the understanding that Sean McVay, the Rams head coach, was very high on Jackson Dart. And so it leads one to believe there's a possibility that McVay might have thought about asking the Rams to go grab him because Matthew Stafford, although, and it's funny, right, the connection between these teams, Giants were trying to get Matthew Stafford in a trade, but then the Rams raised the ante. Stafford said, okay, great, I'll stay, and they wound up giving him an extension. But Stafford is getting a bit on in years, and maybe the Rams were looking to sock away a redshirt quarterback in the future, and McVay perhaps might have been looking for Dart at 26, which, if that was indeed what was going to happen, very fortuitous by the Giants to make the move at 25 and to scap up Dart. So, Iman, I understand, and I'm with you in that I had been saying since the Combine, Ward's going to go number one to the Titans. We all pretty much saw that. The momentum in Indianapolis day after day after day was that Ward's going to the Titans, number 1. Ward's going to the Titans, number 1. Ward's going to the Titans, number 1. When I left and got on the plane back from Indy, I was convinced that was not going to change. And so I started to develop my list of second-tier quarterbacks and said, okay, the Giants are not going to take a quarterback at 3. I certainly would not. I don't think they will. But who's the second tier that I like? Personally, my second tier, and you've heard this for months, was Jackson Dart. Tyler Shuck snuck in there because of the combine and what I had learned there. And then my sleeper quarterback was Kyle McCord of Syracuse, who I thought you might be able to get at 99 or 105 if you decided to wait and you didn't get one of the other two. That's kind of how I would have played it. And then I would also, if you didn't get one of them, I would have been okay with that too. It was a very viable solution not to get any of them and then just wait until next season. In fact, Ric Serritella's NFL Draft Bible, I was looking at it, and he's got like 6 potential big name possible, quarterbacks that are going to attract, bees like honey in the 2026 draft. So that was a viable alternative, if the Giants, did not get somebody that they wanted at the position for the price that they were willing to pay. But anyway, it's now done. Carter and Dart are Giants. All right, let's keep going. Isaac Moore, P. Dot, my man. Dart was a reach. I don't care that the Rams wanted him. Here's the thing, Isaac. If you don't get him, let's say you don't get him and somebody else gets him before you're on the board at 34. Now, again, you have to recalibrate and you decide, okay, do we take one of the other QBs there? I personally believe that would not have been a good spot for Shuck. I think it would have been too high for him, and it would have been too high for McCord. So my feeling was, if the Giants, if I were in the chair of the Giants GM, Joe Shane, my feeling was the only quarterbacks that I would have been looking at were Dart, Shuck, and McCord. And if I didn't get any one of those 3 for whatever reason, I would have just passed. So I get it. And there's no right answer. Here's the good news, though. Let me just give you a little bit about Jackson Dart that I jotted down in my notes. I met him at the combine. And I tell you, it's always important to go because you learn a lot of stuff. The guy walks in the room, and what I wrote was, he's just a dude. He's just a really cool dude. The kind of guy you'd want to go to a ball game with. Very natural. He was not programmed. He was very well spoken, very much at ease. You could sense his leadership skills. He talked about how throughout his career, he basically thanked everybody for the kind of preparation that they did with him, saying that he's been preparing for this his whole life. And I know a lot of guys say that. Some guys really do it. Other guys just pay it lip service. He said he thought that the process that he underwent between USC and then Ole Miss really drove him to this point because he'd been around a ton of NFL people. And then he specifically mentioned how helpful Joe Judge was to him and Lane Kiffin as well, saying that Kiffin was great for his development, helped build off of his strengths. Now, of course, that has been one criticism, right? We heard from Ric Serritella about it. The playbook was more simplified than what you're going to see in the National Football League. It was more about getting the receivers into open spots, matchups, 1 read, maybe 2 reads, and let it go. See, this is why it's so important for Dart to be a redshirt quarterback, because you'll be able to teach him the complexities of an NFL playbook while he sits in his first year of professional play. He's the third string quarterback. In a perfect world, he will not see the field in 2025. And so you can coach that up. You can teach a guy who is shown to be very, very coachable, very smart, very eager. Those are all traits that say you can teach the guy a very high-end playbook. And so that's one of the reasons why he's not a top 10, right? You look for reasons. Why is Jackson Dart not a top 10 first-round draft pick? Well, the two reasons are there's a projection about how well will he adapt to a very complex NFL offense, as well as the complexities of an NFL defense that he'll be facing across the line of scrimmage. There is some doubt about that because of the comp that they played against, some of the weaker teams you heard that were earlier in their schedule this past year. Okay, there's like a bit of a gray area there. The Giants feel that with all of the intangibles that they've learned about him, that's not going to be a barrier. He will be able to be coached up to get to the level that they want him to be at. Makes perfect sense. Now, if he was being forced and thrust into the lineup in week one, I would say that would be quite a deep part of the pool to throw somebody into right out of the box. Fortunately for him, he does not have to face that situation. So I think that's one. The second part is that at times, right? At times, not always, at times, his footwork and his mechanics, especially when under pressure sometimes, it got a little bit awry. And so what would happen is that his passes would then be off the mark, because much like a pitcher in baseball, if your mechanics are awry, the ball is not going to go where you want it to. You won't have great control. Now, the ironic part is every single season during Dart's career, from USC the first year to the 3 seasons at Ole Miss, every single season, his completion percentage went up. And again, yards per attempt went up and yards per reception went up. Or should I say yards per completion? Yards per completion. So unlike some other quarterbacks in this draft who had very high ultra completion percentages, who were throwing, passes in the flat, dump offs to running backs, screen passes, basically keeping the ball near the line of scrimmage where it's really easy to have a high completion percentage, Jackson Dart was throwing the ball down the field. And more often than not only does he have a strong enough arm to play in the NFL, not the strongest arm, but a strong enough arm to make all the throws. But not only that, his accuracy in most cases was really good on all of those kinds of throws. So again, you have to look at the things that you can maybe sand down or polish up, if you will, and say, how much work, how much effort is it going to take to get that stuff fixed? And do you have the time to fix it? And do you have the staff to fix it? Because let's face it, perfect quarterback projects or prospects, don't come off of the NCAA shelf. I guess every once in a while you get an Andrew Luck, right? Every once in a while you get a Justin Herbert. Every once in a while you get an Eli Manning or a Ben Roethlisberger or a Phillip Rivers or some of these guys who just, it doesn't take much, right? You just got to kind of add a little bit of water and mix it up for a couple of minutes. But then there are others that require some elbow grease. The beauty of Dart is that he has so many great intangibles that pro coaches want. So let me go through some of this, right? He said Joe Judge specifically helped him with game prep and breaking down the fundamentals. Dart said one of his mottos is that he competes hard every day. He said he wanted to improve his footwork. right? Now, this is a guy who took shotgun his whole career in college. So he's absolutely going to have to learn how to work under center, as most of these college quarterbacks these days do. Some of them don't work under center at all. Some work under center very infrequently. He himself said he's got to improve his footwork. We just talked about that a couple of moments ago. Do better with his drops. Also said, and this goes back to the complexities of an NFL playbook, said he's got to be faster with his progressions. Well, makes perfect sense. What's the first thing every college player tells you when they get to the league? The game is faster. The game speeds up. It takes time for it to slow down mentally in your head. So, those are the two things he really saw as challenges as he gets to the NFL. And he's going to have plenty of time to start going through these things. Very confident player, I wrote down from, his demeanor. Said he has used everybody he has come into contact with, use them like a sponge to soak everything in. He said he knows that one of his goals is, if he were to come into the league in a situation as a Giants backup, I asked him specifically about that, and he said, my goal would be to make the room better. He's a terrific teammate. Says I'd be willing to adjust to anything that they would want me to do. One thing that was interesting at Ole Miss, he was the key recruiting player on the team. When they wanted to get a player from the transfer portal to come to Ole Miss, they didn't have to hesitate. He was the guy. And you could say, well, okay, he's the quarterback, right? He's the star of the team. Wouldn't they want to? Yeah, but if he doesn't have the demeanor, the maturity, the kind of skill set that can present a very professional, first-class and respectful kind of demeanor, you want, if you're going to recruit somebody out of the transfer portal, you want them to come to your program badly. And he's going to have to be able to, inspire that transfer to pick your school. Well, he was the key guy at Ole Miss who would recruit transfers out of the portal when asked to. So that's a very significant item, which tells you what the people at Ole Miss thought about his ability, not just as a football player, but as a person, and the kind of things that he emitted when he would walk into a room and talk to people. We said when he met with Dable, Dable had a ton of energy. Obviously, Dart had said he knew a lot of the staff, again, through connections, through Charlie Wise, through Joe Judge, through Joe Shane's daughter, got to know Dable. Said as far as his meeting with Coach Dable, they talked ball. He said he wanted to see your recall skills and your knowledge of the game. Wanted to know how you could break down yourself and your tape. And he also wanted to know from Dart about the installs, getting the installs and being able to recall them in their meetings. Things that we've seen Brian Dable do through video from NFL films and so forth over the last year or two. These are very detailed exercises that Dable puts quarterbacks through. He doesn't play games. He's extremely thorough. Anyway, that's some of the stuff that I got from Jackson Dart when I was at the Combine. Other quick comments to give you folks, and I want to get back to your comments and your questions. Hopefully somebody's got an audio or video call for me. I will add, Joe Shane said it was very important to him to hold on to pick number 65. He wanted to keep the first pick in the third round. It was critical that he do so. They were able to trade the 99, the pick late in the third round, the compensatory, as part of the Houston deal. He did not want to part with number 65. First pick of the third round was too critical. So that was the other item in case you missed some of what Joe Shane had said. Dable, talking about Carter, said he was a very fun player to evaluate. Obviously, the pass rushing skills are off the charts. Dable, talking about the quarterbacks, said they finally started to narrow down their choices and make their quarterback decisions started on Monday. That's how late it was. And said that the Ole Miss system that Kiffin runs there, very similar, of course. We know about the college football tree and the branches that extend all over the place. He said that the Ole Miss system was very similar to the system that Dable had gone through when he was an offensive assistant at Alabama. All right, a few things quickly from Abdul Carter. Said he has studied LT, of course, the greatest defensive player in NFL history, through a lot of film and YouTube. Said he loved his intensity, the way he thinks on the field, how dominant he was, and that's what Carter said he aspires to be. Said he expects this edge rushing group between him, Thibodeau, and Burns to be a dominant group as a whole. He said he would line up wherever needed. Again, the versatility that he could play off-ball linebacker allows all three of them to get on the field at the same time in a number of different formations and instances. Said even though he grew up in Philly, his parents, he's like, they're only going to be about an hour and a half away, and it's really a dream to play in a big city like New York. And obviously also said, as far as the foot, the stress reaction that we heard about at the Combine, he had his medical rechecks in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and in his words, he said he was good to go. He's all ready. So that's what we got. Nothing came up about the minor shoulder injury that Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, had said would keep him from working out in the pro day. I suspect that the foot thing may have been part of that as well, but the shoulder situation did not appear to be an issue either. And as we've said to you many times on these programs and other programs before, that Ronnie Barnes, the Giants vice president of medical services, is very specific in particular when they grade these players on a medical scale. And the Giants believe so much in their medical staff that they have the ability to actually take a player off the team's draft board if they believe that the medical risk is too high to take. Okay, back to your chats. And again, I'll take your audio calls or your video calls. I'll be here as long as you guys continue to communicate with me. I certainly won't go past 10 o'clock this morning. 10 a.m., that's going to be the limit. I know for those of you on the West Coast, if you've gotten up really early to join us, thank you so much for getting out of your slumber and participating in the program. I know right now it's about 6:30 out there on the West Coast, but I'm going to take it to the max, which would be 10 o'clock. We may end a little before that, depending upon if you guys run out of steam. C-Web Senior says, good morning, happy Friday. I think it is a happy Friday for most Giants fans, C-Web. I have seen a few dissenting opinions, but not very many. Iman Perry, not 100% sure what those emojis are. Let's say sleep and laugh. No, sleep and cry and laugh. I'm not sure exactly what that means, Iman, but I did get about a 3-hour nap. Okay, about a 3-hour nap. Rose Tap 87. What position do you think the Giants draft in the 3rd round? Well, I know this is over an hour old, Rose Tap. I hope you're still with us, and I would simply say to you, it's for me and for Ric Serritella of the NFL Draft Bible, it's got to be the trenches, right? There's just too many guys there. I'll give you some names in addition to some of the names that Rick gave you guys earlier. If you want to look at offensive line, there's Marcus Mabeau out of Purdue, potentially guard tackle flexibility. There's Tate Ratledge, the guard out of Georgia, who is an absolute bulldog. Again, he's one of those Richie Seubert types, right? Who just foams at the mouth, blue-collar guy. It may not always look pretty, but boy, is he going to work up a sweat and get after you like a pit bull, quite frankly. So those are a couple of offensive linemen you might want to think about at 65. If you want to go to the defensive line, I had written down Alfred Collins, who was a big plugger, 330-plus pound nose tackle. I don't know if he's going to be there at 65. When I said to Rick earlier, who's the guy you realistically would like, and then who's the guy you hope drops? Alfred Collins would be a guy I would hope would drop to 65. I don't know that he will. Darius Alexander out of Toledo is another one of those defensive tackles. Not as quite wide or as big or as heavy, but a guy who absolutely has some terrific traits and is going to be a good one in this league. I think there's more of a chance he would be there at 65 than Collins. Joshua Farmer from Florida State. We talked about him. Now, he is, quite the specimen and long arms and really wreaks havoc along the defensive front. TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. Again, this guy's a little on the smaller side again, a little bit over 300 pounds. I mean, there's so many of them. Defensive tackles plentiful who are going to be productive players in this league. Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. Talk about a plugger. That's another guy who's like 330 pounds. Man, there are some big guys in this draft. That's for sure. They don't skimp on food. Some of these big defensive tackles. I'm thinking maybe you could get him more or less at the top of the fourth at 105. Anyway, those would be some of the names to look for. Cornerback, we did go in. If you wanted to go corner, right? I think if you went running back, Scadaboo's the only guy I would consider there if you really wanted to go there. And if you wanted to go corner, I think there's a chance that Siobhan Revelle out of East Carolina could possibly be there at 65. Ben Morrison, Notre Dame. You heard Rick mention the injury situation. He's had a few, but there's no doubt about his measurables and his talent. If you're willing to take a little bit of a gamble there, there's a chance he could fall to 65. He was a first-round talent, without the injuries. So that would be a guy you might want to think of. Noah Williams out of Cal is another guy who potentially I would think could be there at 65. So those are some of the corner names that you might want to watch for. And again, I think Scadaboo, to me, is probably he's the lead dog of the power backs for sure who are left. Junkins is another really nice, forceful power back, and I don't believe he's been taken yet either. Let me just check my list. No, Quinshon Junkins out of Ohio State has not been taken yet either. He's a pretty forceful back, and he's going to be up there. Scadaboo is people mention to me about Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I think he's a big back for sure. I don't think he plays with as much ferocity, though, as Junkins does, or as Scadaboo does, or as Ollie Gordon does. But he is certainly a big, strong, powerful back. And perhaps if he got here, remember, Liddell Betts was his running backs coach at Iowa. He's now the running backs coach with the Giants. Maybe if he did get here, he would run with more ferocity and play truer to his frame. So that's a guy that you might want to consider, again, if you're going to just decide, I'll go running back. But to answer your question, Rose Tap 87, I really think I need to go trenches at pick number 65 and probably also at pick 105. I think that's really the way I need to go. That's the way I want to go. Now, if too many of these other trenches guys get scapped up on both sides, I don't think that'll happen. I think at least at one of those spots, you'll get a trench guy. I can't believe that at both spots, all of these options that I gave you on either side of the ball would be gone. But if that happened at either spot and the value was there for a corner, I could certainly understand it. And again, there's no way in the world, if they were to get Scatterboo somewhere in there, that I'm going to cry, because how could you not but wear a huge smile if you get Cam Scatterboo? How could you not? The ferocity of his runs inspires and sparks offenses and teammates, much like what Brandon Jacobs did for the Giants during their 2 Super Bowls. He has that kind of effect. He's not Brandon Jacobs, but because of the power, ferocity, and the way he drops the hammer and lays the wood on people, that style, his effort, his motor, he does inspire and spark teammates. So he has that effect on people. So he is a special guy. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts there about those rounds. Aiden Fink says, hadn't heard Paul's voice this early in the morning since the radio pregame for the Germany game. That's for sure. Rose Tap, is it possible Giants draft another quarterback in the later rounds, double up their chances? Rose Tap 87, I wouldn't think there's any way in the world that's going to happen. Alex says, need a run stuffer. I absolutely think that's a very real need on the board. Without question, that's a need on the board. And again, we mentioned some of those pluggers, the guys who are 330 pounds, or about. You never know day to day based on how much they eat, how much those guys are going to weigh. But, there's no question, Alex. I'm with you 100%. I've been saying for weeks, in fact, maybe even back to the combine, I wouldn't mind drafting 2 defensive tackles, one kind of earlier and maybe even one later on the 3rd day. Shanita Jackson says, good morning, Paul, and to Ric Serritella, who's now gone, but I'll tell him. You love the Carter pick for the Giants. Still not sure about Dart, but it'll give the Giants a chance since it was rumored McVay and the Rams definitely wanted to draft him. You have to take that stuff into account. James O'Keefe says, I never went to sleep. No, actually, I did get a 3-hour nap. Thank goodness. James says, telling that the Rams traded back after the Giants jumped them to pick Dart. That could be a conclusion that one would draw. Big Blue says, Paul, great picks. I believe in Dart Man. How about that? He's already got a nickname for him, the Dart Man. The defense could be top 6. Thanks for all your insights. Big Blue, thanks for being one of the loyal followers of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Christine says, excellent guest. Ric Serritella, thank you so much. The man who authors the NFL Draft Bible. Again, you can reach Rick through at NFL Draft Bible on Twitter and also at All Access Football if you do a search online. Christine says she likes Farmer too. That's the DT out of Florida State. He is a big guy. MB Goblin says, trusting in this process. We got our blue chip. We got our potential quarterback in the future. Now we get our chance to build the trenches. G-Men, baby. Is it Bajil Vargi says, running back, offensive line, or defensive tackle tonight would be solid. Love day one picks so much. Says Junkins is the running back I want, or Caleb Johnson. We just mentioned those names, Bill. Bajil, I'm sorry. I apologize. I missed the J there for just a second as I was looking at your name. There are options. There are options. See, we told you coming into this draft that the spots that the Giants would fortify were pretty deep. That's beautiful when need meets value. There are times that you'll go into a draft needing 1, 2, 3 positions, and those positions are sparse. That happens. It's horrible timing for sure, but it happens. And then you have to scramble. And it's like, uh-oh, how's this going to go? Because if we take one guy, player A, to kind of fortify one of the thin spots over here, we pretty much know that this other thin spot is going to stay thin because there's not enough of really good prospects that we're going to get in the later rounds to help that weakness or deficiency. That happens a lot. Well, in this draft, plenty of defensive line, high quality defensive line, enough of legitimate rotational potential groom starting offensive line, possible depth at cornerback, as Joe Shane mentioned, right? And certainly a plethora of running backs, although a much smaller subset group of running backs if you want a hammer, okay? The hammers are a much smaller percentage of what is a very large and very talented running back group. I happen to think that if it were me, Tyrone Tracy has enough of the all-around skills that I would like to see a hammer, supplement him, work in conjunction with him, be the guy to grind out and push the pile for short yardage or down near the goal line, or even more importantly, 4-minute offense. 4-minute offense. Keep your defense off the field. Reward them for all their hard work during your game. When they've helped get you a lead with 4 minutes to go, why put the pressure on them and put them back out on the field? Run your 4-minute offense, pound at that rock, pound at that rock, pound at that rock, and just whittle away the yardage, move the sticks, run the clock, and tell that defense that you can towel off on the bench because we got this. Listen to the final gun and run off the field with a victory. When's the last time the Giants have been able to really even think about a plan like that? My 2 cents. Clay from Brooklyn, we were never going to fix everything in one off season. Absolutely correct. You can't do that, but you can get significantly better. Adding Carter gives us an identity, he says. Love it. Dart gives us optimism for the future, he adds. Now we should add a stud defensive tackle, maybe trade up again. Well, Clay, here's the problem. The Giants picks, and by the way, the second round starts tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. The Giants picks tonight is really only one, right? Because they traded number 34 in the Dart deal. So they got number 65, first pick of the third round. What do you want to do? You've already traded a third rounder from 2026 in the Dart package as well. So what are you going to use to potentially move up into the second round? I don't know that it's possible. I don't think Joe Shane wants to touch any more of next year's draft collateral. I just don't think he does. And you're really not going to get a whole lot. I mean, if you packaged, based on the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, if you packaged 65 with 105, and by the way, that's the juicy tomato portion of this draft. If you package those picks together, the points value chart is going to get you somewhere into the mid 50s, maybe mid to high 50s overall, which would be in the bottom third of the second round. I don't know why you would do that, because then if you pick there, you would not be up on the board until 154. And that's the middle of the fifth round. So, Clay from Brooklyn, I don't see the Giants making any deals here. Now, perhaps later in the third day, if there's some minor trade, some kind of flip-flop or something that they might entertain because there's a certain guy who seems to be falling and they really kind of have a thing for him, maybe I could see that. But I think to get 2 cuts of that juicy beefsteak tomato at 65 and 105 is the way to go, especially with how we talked about value meeting need with the trenches, potentially running back and potentially corner, all still being fruitful during these third and fourth rounds. MB Goblin says Junkins is a beast. That wouldn't be a bad pick. Forceful player. Yes, forceful running back. He certainly does take shots at the rock. He says, I prefer we address our O-line or D-line, but if he has value at 65, then they should pull the trigger and maybe trade back up into the third round or sit and pick. Yeah, again, for the reasons I just explained, I don't think you're going to be moving up at all in day 2. I just don't see it happening. But yeah, this is the same problem, MB Goblin, that I just talked about with Ric Serritella. Is there a running back juicy enough that would make you alter the plan and get away from the offensive line and defensive line? Would you perhaps veer from the trenches for a running back or a corner? Is there one that special for you that you'd have to do it? Because in my gut, my instinct is I got to go trenches with the next 2 picks. Christine says, great information on Dart. Thank you. And thank you for listening and participating in our show this morning. Mikey C says Josh Beck, I think he means Besh, would be a good spot at 65. I probably would 65 back to get extra. Oh, I think he means trade back. And he also says Caldwell from Oregon could be a play at the 3rd and 4th pick. Yeah, Jamari Caldwell. Absolutely. Where did I see Caldwell on my notes? I put Caldwell, I want to say I have him as a possible 4. Caldwell, and I'm going to get to Aiden's video call in just a second. So don't go away, Aiden. I see you. I have Caldwell written as a possible plugger at 105. Okay? 65 is, I think, too high for him. But again, this is why we talked about for months. There's 4 good, solid rounds of defensive tackles. To say Jamari Caldwell might be had at pick 105 at the beginning of the 4th round is not an insult to him. Actually, it's praise for the class of defensive tackles in this draft. That's how that should be viewed. Mikey C wants Mullings, the Mulldozer, my sleeper running back in this draft. He wants him in the 5th round. And finally, I just want to get him out of the way here. I got 3 more chats, Aiden. Stay with me. MB Goblin says, Peter, where do you think the biggest drop-off is for defensive tackle and running back in this draft? What position do you think we are better saving for later versus drafting ASAP? I think after the 4th round, the defensive tackle crop gets a bit thinner, although there's going to probably be, Pegues is going to be there. Deion Walker, when you're talking 5th round, the plugger out of Kentucky, some people like him higher. They think he's 4th or 5th. Jordan Phillips out of Maryland is probably in that 4th and 5th range, certainly by the 5th round. Okay, and the Giants don't have a 5th round pick, MB Goblin. They don't. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the 6th they don't have. They have the 5th. So if you want to think of this as a 3-pick group, it's 65, it's 105, and it's 154. Okay? 3rd, 4th, 5th. 65, 105, 154. In those 3 picks, I would think you would wind up with a defensive tackle, an offensive lineman, and probably it's going to be a corner or a running back, I would think. And again, I say don't draft positions, but I'm saying that the value and the depth at those spots is going to get you valued players in these rounds at those positions. All right, real quick, Captain America says, I love it. Sanders says they did trade away a ton to get Manning. Yeah, they certainly did. Most people thought Ernie Accorsi overpaid when they made the deal involving Phillip Rivers with the San Diego Chargers. And Scott Young says, at work, Paul, sorry, excited about our 2 draft choices. Hey, let's go back for the second time today. We had Ric Serritella of the NFL Draft Bible on a video call. Now we go back to our video calls, and we get Aiden.
Hi.
Aiden, how's it going, my friend?
Good. I love the picks and just want to chime in and talk about it a little bit.
Please do.
Yeah, so first I like both of them. I think the Carter, I think we need to have more headache players, and I think he's an immediate impact player. And the thing I would think you would agree with it, I feel like the defense is really coming along, and I feel like we still need to get pieces to our offense, but it's definitely going to take some time.
Well, Aiden, I think first things first, and I'm glad that you use my terminology.
Yeah.
Carter is a headache player. He really is. You have to worry. The opposing coordinator has to worry on Monday night prior to the game as they're making that game plan. They have to worry about how are we going to deal with this guy. He is a headache player. He's going to keep people up at night figuring him out. So yes. Now, the thing that I would kind of disagree with a little bit. I know you're saying we need the Giants need some more offense.
I feel like right now it's just neighbors.
I get that, but right now, and that's why I'm with you in terms of I'd like to add someone to the running back room, specifically somebody who's different than what's in there now. That's why I want a hammer.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I'm asking you for a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Who in that running backs room would you feel really great about right now to run the 4-minute offense and drain the clock?
I still don't feel confident enough in Tracy yet. I mean, he had a good rookie year. You got to see what he does beyond his rookie year.
Well, I also don't think he's a 20-plus carry a game guy. So, you'd like to think that his 17 or 18 carries on a given Sunday is going to help you get that lead. But now if there's 4 minutes to go and, you're up by 2 points or 4 points, don't you want someone who's just going to pound the rock and crack it and move the chains?
Yeah.
And I know Singletary is kind of that guy. He's a very hard workhorse, blue-collar, reliable, durable back, and I like him. He's a pro. He's a great teammate. He's been a mentor to Tracy. But he's not necessarily the guy who's going to move the pile in a 4-minute offense.
Yeah, and how would you feel about, because I feel like we're going to draft because it's a good running back class. Like, I think we're going to take another one. How would you feel? Because, I feel like it lacks a veteran presence. I mean, Tracy would be going into year 2, then you would have a rookie. Then do you think Singletary becomes the 3 or they possibly trade him?
Well, I think Singletary will be here.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And again, so he's the mentor. He's the big brother in the room.
Yeah.
He's a pro's pro. So there's nothing wrong with having Singletary here. I think he's an asset to the team. Believe me, I do. But at the same time, I would rather have a big, strong, powerful hammer working short yardage and the 4-minute offense. And certainly, let's not forget, Singletary's been around this league for a half a dozen years too. There's nothing wrong with getting a young stud in that room. That's why I'm asking for who I'm asking for. Now, other than that, Aiden, and I've said before, as an afterthought, if you could grab a speedy wide receiver, certainly, I'm always preferential, as you know, to skyscrapers. But if you can grab a speedy wide receiver, late in the 6th or 7th, or take a flyer on an undrafted rookie free agent, sure, absolutely. But I think with Neighbors and Robinson and Theo Johnson, and Slayton and Tracy, and if you get the hammer in the backfield, you got Russell Wilson throwing the ball. Remember, he makes big plays. He throws the ball downfield. I think that offense is capable enough to compete, especially after the Giants have really added strong reinforcements to special teams through free agency. I've talked to people, and the consensus that I get from football people is the Giants signed like 3 or 4 really good special teams guys who can really tilt the field on specials, and that the Giants are going to go into almost every Sunday this year thinking they've got the edge in that third of the game. And they have been able to say that for a bit. And that in combination with what you want to be a dominant defense is a formula that's going to get this team a lot more wins and certainly a lot more competitive. The one thing that's missing right now, though, Aiden, and this is why, again, I appreciate your thoughts about the offense, but to get that dominant defense, you got to get another defensive tackle, another bruiser in there to either spell Dexter Lawrence when he has to come out of a game or to play alongside Dexter Lawrence. Because let's face it, the guys in the secondary they signed, Adebo and Holland, well, that helps the pass defense more than the rush defense.
Yeah.
Okay? Carter helps the pass rush more than he does the rush defense. Golston, okay, I like Golston a lot. I think he can be a valuable piece here. But he also is part of, he's a two-way player, but I think they think he's going to help them more in the pass rush game. You need to add a really strong, nasty, in the trenches defensive tackle. You know, Leonard Williams was the perfect partner for Dexter Lawrence. And you don't find guys like Leonard Williams very often.
No.
And it's unfortunate. But they made the trade. They got the picks back. They knew they weren't going to be able to pay him with their salary cap situation. So I don't blame the Giants for doing what they did. They were kind of boxed in. They had to. But they haven't found a real replacement for him. And you have to. Because, Aiden, it goes to the other side of the ball, too. If you're down by a score and you need the ball back, and the other team's going to run a 4-minute offense, and they're going to gas you and gas you and gas you because you can't stop the run, where's that going to leave you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the last 2 Super Bowls, the way we won was because of the defense.
It's been a trademark of all of the Giants' success stories over the years.
Definitely.
And as every coach will tell you, if you don't stop the run on 1st and 2nd down, you don't force them into those critical 3rd down passing situations where you can unleash your toxin on the other team's offense.
Yeah.
So, Aiden, I appreciate the call this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right, we'll see you again.
See ya.
Have a great day. 201. Oh, here I am giving a phone number. No, this is only a chattable or audio or video. Whoa, what did I do just there? I got myself out of there. Hold on. There we go. Hey, I'm back. There we go. I'm still not the most technically inclined, folks. I do the best that I can. Okay, let's see. Rose Tap 87. Why did Sanders not get drafted in the 1st round? Rose Tap, there was a wide variety of opinions about Shedeur Sanders. To those people who would have a good system for him and who really liked, you know, the tools that he has that fit into that system, perhaps those people just decided that 1st round was too rich. But then there was another group of folks, and I truly believe that, you know, we talk about systems and schemes, and sometimes we don't pay enough attention to that. It does make a difference. You know, I personally think that Sanders, in order for him to excel and to be at his best and maximize whatever potential he has, he's going to have to go to a team that, you know, relies heavily on a run game with a really strong offensive line that's going to get rid of the ball ultra quick, a lot of short passes. there's going to be certain things that are going to be necessary components for them to bring out the best in what he has to offer. I never thought that those components would have been a glove fit for the Giants. That's why he was, for me, when I made up my list, if I were in the chair, what would I do? I told you who my 3 quarterbacks were in order, assuming that Ward was disqualified because he was going to the Titans all along. It was Dart, it was Shuck, it was McCord. Those guys, for me, had the talents and the style of tools that would have fit better here at MetLife Stadium and with the current roster and that the Giants have and the schemes that they play and the kinds of things that they do and the roster makeup. I can't speak for, the 32 teams, but I could tell you that from talking to people at the Combine and many, many educated and experienced football people since, these quarterbacks were of a lot of different flavors. They weren't all like the same style and the same flavor. They were a lot of different flavors. And a lot of times beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Mikey C, I see the G-Man drafting a defensive tackle, wide receiver, running back due to players' drop and value. I don't necessarily believe they would draft a receiver. I know that I would not, unless it was at the very end, probably 6th or 7th round. But then again, many personnel people will tell you that it's not worth drafting a receiver there because wide receiver and defensive back are the 2 positions where you can find the most success in undrafted rookie free agents, because there are literally so many of them coming out of college and are pro eligible each and every year. And it's impossible for every team in the league to have scouted every single one of them. So there will be free agent wide receivers and free agent defensive backs who fall through the cracks. For example, Victor Cruz, and many years before that, the 1986 Super Bowl Giants, Bobby Johnson. This happens, especially more so at wide receiver than DB, but it does also happen at DB. But the point is that if the Giants wanted to add another depth piece at receiver, they could wait, again, maybe till after the draft, and perhaps even sign a veteran on the street to compete at training camp should they want to. I don't see them necessarily burning a draft pick on one unless it's 6th or 7th round. And again, I'm not so sure that they would do that either. Mikey C, if D. Alexander is there at 65, Joe Shane should run and announce it. Darius Alexander out of Toledo is a terrific defensive line prospect. Again, that's the heart of the beefsteak tomato. 3rd, 4th round. That's the heart. So I get you. I get you. I think that Alexander doesn't make it to 105, Mikey C. I don't think he does. So if you decide you're going to go defensive line, okay, I would rather have Alfred Collins myself out of Texas, because he's just, I've talked to him. I've been in person with Alfred Collins. He's like, do I say he's like physically Dexter Lawrence 2.0? I'd rather have Alfred Collins, but I don't think it's realistic to think that Collins drops to 65. I think it's more likely that Alexander is there. So I appreciate your thought and your sentiment. All right. It is 1 minute to 10 o'clock. I was pretty much prepared to stop at 10, but I tell you what, folks, if you guys want me to keep going, if we can get more chats here, and if somebody wants to do an audio or a video call, I'm very preferential to those if we can get a few of those. I'll give it a few more minutes. And if you guys really demand it, I will try to stay on for a little bit longer. But otherwise, we'll prepare to sign off in just a bit. Let me get that link back up there again. You see it on the bottom of your screen to join the program. And you can go here. There you go. And we would very much love to hear from you. Rogue says, how much cap space do the Giants have available? Because J.K. Dobbins is still a free agent, so maybe we don't address running back. Well, that's very interesting. Let me just check a second here. J.K. Dobbins, I want to make sure that number one, he is still available. Number two, he is not coming off any injuries, because quite frankly, I have not been heavily reading up on J.K. Dobbins since the season ended. And I don't know if he left at the end of last season with some things that were going to have to be corrected or fixed, if you will. Let me take a look here. What do I see? Okay, looks like I don't see anything about his off-season situation. Don't see anything that says he would have to have any kind of surgery. He did have knee injury last year. Okay. We know in the past, right? ACL in 2021. Yeah, we know that. We do know about the torn Achilles tendon in 2023. We know that. Doesn't look like there was any major injury that he had to deal with during the offseason. Now, is J.K. Dobbins a free agent at the moment? Let me take a look at that, because I'm not 100% sure what his contract status was. He was not a gentleman I was necessarily looking to. Yes, he is a free agent. Still, no one has signed him. I don't remember, quite honestly, Rogue, of seeing his name come across on any visitations with any teams as a free agent either. So, I personally would rather go with a young player who has a much cleaner, not necessarily perfect. How many players come out of even the NCAA with a perfect health resume. But I'd kind of rather go with a younger, cleaner running back, especially if I'm going to get a hammer, because hammers, not only do they delve out a pounding, they take a pounding. And so for my purposes, I really would love to draft, a young stud coming out of school. Look, the Bulldozer, Khalil Mullings out of Michigan, I'm going back to him for a second. Think about this with him. Let me get his carry number up here on the board for just a second, because he only started this year. He was a reserve at Michigan until he grabbed the starting the starting job this year from Edwards. And let me see what his total carries are. You talk about a guy who does not have a lot of wear and tear on his tires. Remember, he's a former linebacker. Came to Michigan as a linebacker. Talk about tough, okay? This guy didn't have pancakes for breakfast this morning. He had nails for breakfast. Let me see if I can find his numbers. Okay, total numbers. Look at this. His career at Michigan, only 235 carries for over 1,200 yards, because last year had 185 carries, 12 touchdowns, 948 yards, and averaged just over 5 yards a carry. See, now do you understand why I'm so excited about him? Because he hasn't had a lot of wear and tear on his tires, and yet he runs angry. He delivers a shot to the rock every time he carries the ball. I should stop talking about it because you guys all know, if you've been watching me for years, you know what happens when I talk about a player too much. Somebody always winds up scapping him up and taking him away. Rogue says, I do agree we definitely need a bigger back to pair with Tracy. Well, not everybody agrees with that, Rogue, right? I appreciate that you do, because that's where I'm coming from. That's my philosophy. Because remember something, right? The top 6 rushing teams in the National Football League each made the playoffs this past season. That's the first time it's happened in NFL history. The worm has actually started to turn from being a very pass-happy game. And even though the rules have always, since the last 15, 20 years, every tweak they make to the rules does favor a more pass-happy attack. Teams finally started to realize the last couple of years, the tide has started to turn a little bit. And now it's like, wait a minute. You know what? You really do have to run the ball. Of course you do. That's chapter 1 in Football 101. Pound the rock. And so teams are now starting to turn that a little bit. Now what you're finding out is that teams are focusing on grinding it. I believe the stat was mentioned to me that this was the first time. I don't know if it's the first time in recent years, modern years, or all time. There were 6 running backs last year that had at least 300 rushes. Think about this for a minute. Barkley, Henry, Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams with the Rams. 6 running backs last year had a minimum of 300 carries. The proof is in the pudding, folks. You have to be able to run the ball. It's been there all along. It was just ignored for a long time while everybody got enamored with playing video game pass-oriented football. But now it's back. Now, the one thing I will say is that if you want to be able to run the ball with multiple guys, I'm all for that. It doesn't have to be a 320 carry guy. It does not have to be that way. But just think about what the Giants did when they had Brandon Jacobs and they had Derek Ward and they had Ahmad Bradshaw. And then later on, when it was Bradshaw and Jacobs. It can be a two-headed monster. That's okay. It doesn't have to be one. Although, again, there seems to be a trend now with the 6 300-plus carries back to go with one guy. There's the bell cow back is what we used to call them back in the 70s and the 80s. It was the bell cow running back because, he was the guy, right? He was the guy. Well, we're seeing some of that now again, but a 2-headed backfield is fine. A 3-headed backfield is fine. If you can find 3 guys who are good enough, who have skill sets that complement each other. They're not the same, but they complement each other. If you can do that, look how many years the Ravens did it. They pounded the rock. They were one of the teams that always understood you had to run the ball. And they pounded the rock with a couple of running backs for a few years. Then, of course, they got Lamar Jackson to get involved in their running game too. That's a whole nother story. And then they decided, we're gonna sign Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry is going to be the guy. So they've done it both ways over the years. Christine says she agrees about the running back and with Rogue. And Rogue also says the two-headed backfield for Detroit works pretty well. I'm all in for having two backs. Okay, well, Rogue, let me ask you this then. Of the bigger backs, there's no doubt of the guys left, Scatterboo for me would be at the top of the list right now. And Junkins runs hard and ferocious, and he would be one of the guys in that shopping cart. Yes. But Scatterboo would be the lead guy. He's the special guy. Do you feel like you would need to get one here, third, fourth round, or do you think you'd be willing to wait to the fifth? And then, to be frank, yeah, you can't even do in the sixth because the Giants don't have a sixth-round pick. You'd have to go to the seventh round. Third pick in the seventh round is 219. 30th pick in the seventh round is 246. You don't have one in the sixth. So you'd have to wait until the seventh. And I think you could probably get Mullings there. Maybe not. Maybe you'd have to jump on him at 154. But, you know, how strongly do you feel? Let's see here. Rogue says, Scatterboo's the top for me too. Yeah, he is. The question becomes, Rogue, though, is he so much on top that you could possibly bypass the trenches at 65 and 105? Ooh, that's tough. Rogue says, I would rather take one at 65, which I think you could get Scatterboo at 65, and in fact, you probably have to get him at 65, unless you want to take best player available. Again, the best player available at 65 is probably going to be somebody in the trenches. It's just likely, based on the amount of talent that is in those positions in this neighborhood of the draft. It's probably going to be, the BPA is probably going to be in the trenches, specifically defensive tackle. That's what I would think. Now, there's also a possibility, and they always say you can't have enough edge rushers, right? I'm going to tell you folks, I would not at this point. You just got Abdul Carter. I would not necessarily even think about an edge rusher, but there are certainly some of those guys who could fall to you and might wind up being the best player available at 65 or 105. I don't necessarily know it would be by that much. And remember, if it's close, you then have the opportunity, according to the Football 101 philosophy, if you're going best player available, it says if you're really close in the cluster, you then have to factor in need, law of supply and demand, and you can pass on the best player available under those circumstances. I don't know exactly how these edge rushers are going to come off the board. I expect that there's going to be a bunch of them in the second round, and then there'll be some decent ones still left over, at least in the first half of the third. Yeah, for sure. I do believe that. I didn't even discuss edge rusher with Ric Serritella of the NFL Draft Bible before because, again, after the Giants drafted Abdul Carter, to me, that's probably a long shot that they wind up going there. But I will tell you this, if best player available is an edge rusher, and he is by far a higher grade than whoever else is still left at the Giants slot, you know, you always make that argument. If the guy's grade is that much higher, I mean, let me pick an example for you. What would be a great example? If for some reason the Boston College edge rusher And I have problems pronouncing his name, and that's why I'm looking for my. I wrote down phonetically on my notes. Isaiah Ruwaku, or Isaiah Ruwaku, yeah, Isaiah Ruwaku. That's what I believe it is. Oh, I could just call him Ezzy. Donovan Isaiah Ruwaku from Boston College. Okay, he's a second round pick, right? That's what he is. He's a second round value. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind. He is a second round value, probably early second round. Now, if you have no blemishes on him and he's sitting there at 65 at the top of the third round, I can't see any way that happens. But if it does, could you blame them if they took him? He's a really high-quality red chip pass rushing prospect. And they say you can never have enough. I wouldn't do it myself. I would stick to the plan, and I would still probably shy away. There's logic behind taking him if he falls. I get it. If a potential really, really good pass rusher falls a full round like that, and you can't find any reason why he did, and he's the best player on the board, and there's a gap, yes, there is definitely a logical, reasonable, rational philosophy that says you have to take him. I totally understand that. I would not disagree with it. I would, however, prefer and opine that there's somebody good enough in the trenches that you could take at 65 who would also be quite impactful for your football team and more immediately as well. I can't stress enough, John Mara, the Giants co-owner, who, by the way, made it very clear in his postseason press conference after the final game was played in January when he said, this defense needs to be fixed. He was tired of seeing teams run up and down and all over the field against the defense. Well, how are you going to fix that? We've discussed this. A Debo, corner, Holland, safety. Yeah, they can make some plays in the run game. Sure, I get it. But that doesn't really fully plug the hole. Golston on the defensive line, I think he's going to be more of a three technique pass rusher. Myself. So Carter, more of a pass rusher. You got to get a stud. If it's me, I'm going to make sure I leave this draft with a big, nasty you-know-what who really drops the wood against the run. A guy who you could get up there, put him either next to Dexter Lawrence on many a plays, or sometimes spell Dexter Lawrence when he's got to come out for a break. I need to know that the Giants have the ability to stop a 4-minute offense when the other team is running downhill and trying to run the clock out. Right now, despite all of the additions that the Giants have added to their defense, right now, I don't feel much better about their 4-minute defense at the end of a game. I don't. I think they need a Herculean, big, sturdy, large-framed, you-know-what, who can help make that 4-minute defense at the end of the game hold up. Anchor, be sturdy, dig your feet in, and don't yield. Get that ball back for Russell Wilson. Get that ball back from Malik Neighbors. Don't watch the sticks move. Don't let the time drain off the clock. Stonewall that other team. I would have to come out of this draft with somebody who can help make that happen. And I think that's got to come in all likelihood at 65. If it comes at 105, that's okay. But I'd love it to be Alfred Collins of Texas at 65. I really would. I don't know if it will be, but I really would. Joshua Farmer would be fine at 65. There's another option for you. And again, there's TJ Sanders. You want to go to 105? Jamari Caldwell could be there. Okay? But man, oh man, oh man. I think I'd like to see one at 65 because I think the talent's there. I think the grade is going to be there. Christine says, I want more trench players. A-Train says, P-Dot, this D-line is going to be good if they all stay healthy. If you had to pick a number where you would like them to rank in defense at the end of the year, top 10 would be good for me. A-Train, I don't run from anything that I say because I've been around a long time. I have the experience and the knowledge and the conviction of what I see and what I believe. And I told people before the start of this past season that the Giants could crack. If everybody was healthy and playing to their potential, the Giants could crack the top 10 defensively. But what happened? Well, Kayvon Thibodeau did not have a very good year and missed a third of the season because of wrist surgery. Dexter Lawrence at times wore down and then finally wound up with an elbow injury that cost him the latter part of the season. They did not get enough production out of their other defensive tackle spot. Quite frankly, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't there. Brian Burns played to a alternate Pro Bowl level, and I agree with that. I think he was very underrated, but he was badly banged up. And he didn't want to come off the field. They had trouble getting him off. But at the same time, they had to pull him off the field sometimes because he was so badly hurting. And he gave everything he had. So that was a bit of an issue because he wasn't fully healthy for most of the season. And it did inhibit some of his overall production. But again, I'm giving him great plaudits for having the kind of season that he had. An almost Pro Bowl season to where he was voted as an alternate. I thought Brian Burns was absolutely, backs to the wall, playing his guts out during the course of last season. Also, Bobby Okereke, his production went down. Now, why? Well, there was a scheme adjustment. There's no question about that. Okay, there's no sense in pushing that to the side. The scheme adjustment was a bit of an issue. But the other issue was the line in front of him. Again, this is why you have to get a plugger, a physical, you-know-what. Because even if that guy isn't making the tackle or isn't necessarily blocking the runner from going where he wants to go, the fact that he's occupying the offensive lineman or the fullback or the tight end or whoever it is, that allows Bobby Okereke to roam free, pick his spot, attack, and then make the hit. Bobby Okereke had too many people running into him last year. The Giants' defensive line did not do a good enough job of keeping Okereke free. When he was signed from the Indianapolis Colts, the word on him was, give him some space to roam. You don't want him having to look. He's not Harry Carson. Okay? Those linebackers are from yesteryear, where the inside guys, Mike Singletary, Harry Carson, Jack Lambert, those guys were big, strong, thick, physical. They took people on downhill all the time. They shedded blockers. They blew up blockers and still made the tackles. Today's modern day inside linebacker wants space to roam, to be athletic, to be quick and fast, to be able to angle himself to the ball tackler, to be able to shoot the gap where he believes the read is going to be. He does need to work in conjunction with the guys in front of him. And the Giants weren't good enough in front of Bobby Okereke. So between that and the scheme adjustment, that's why his production went down. And then, of course, you had Tay Banks, who had sophomore slump, whatever you want to call it. He did not progress to the level that he should have in his second season. And then on the other side, Adoree Jackson, who came back late, right? He came back just at the very end because the Giants were trying to figure out the corner spot. And Adoree Jackson was not as productive as he had been earlier in his Giants career. Drew Phillips played really well in the slot. But then what happened? He also got hurt his arm. And it impacted his play. And he tried to fight through it. And he stayed out there. And then finally, they had to get him out of the lineup because he was hurting so much. And then he went back in the lineup anyway because he was tougher than nails and put forth yeoman's work to try to help this team. But all of these things impacted the anticipated production of what could have theoretically been on the fringe, at least, of a top 10 defense. So what did the Giants do? They add a playmaker and a coverage guy in Adebo, top of the free agent class at corner. They add Holland, top of the safety class, a playmaker. They add Golston along the front to help out that defensive line. But again, he's not a guy who's going to be in there and drop an anchor against a 4-minute offense from the other side. That's not what he is. He's more of an hold the edge defensive end on first and second down throughout the course of a game, and then also moving inside to be a 3-technique pass rushing defensive tackle. Think of Chauncey Golston as playing the role. I'm not going to say he's anywhere near the player. I will not do that. Justin Tuck is in the Ring of Honor for a reason and a 2-time Super Bowl champion. But the role that Justin Tuck played is the role that you want Chauncey Golston to play. So this defense is going to be better. But that component about anchoring against a power running team between the tackles, I would address that. And I would address it at 65. Okay. Christine says defensive tackle and offensive line. Well, I think we're pretty much on the same page here. Folks, if somebody else wants to chime in, I'm going to take this thing to 10:30 Eastern time. That would be 7:30 Pacific time for those of you on the left coast. We've got nearly 1,500 people watching live on the program right now. And I greatly appreciate every one of you for joining us for a little breakfast in football as we not only recap what happened in day one for the Giants during the first round of the NFL draft, but we also previewed what may be coming in day 2 and day 3. My thanks to Ric Serritella of All Access Football and the NFL Draft Bible. If you missed any part of his conversation as we broke things down and really got into the weeds, again, not only of what the Giants did, but what you can expect to see upcoming in rounds 3 and 4 and 5. He had great information. We gave you a whole bunch of names that you can put on your checklist and keep an eye out for as the draft proceeds ahead. Ric Serritella joined me 15 minutes into the program, and he was kind enough and generous enough to give me over a half hour. So as we bid you adieu this morning, I invite you to go back. If you did not get up with the Roosters, okay, go check out the stuff from Ric Serritella. Again, 15 minutes into the program, we did a little over a half hour and gave you some really terrific intel about what you should look for moving forward here for the Giants in the NFL draft. A-Train does sneak in one final comment. Last thing, P-Dot, would the Giants consider Ole Miss receiver Harris? Look, here's the only thing I'm going to say. I've kind of gone through my philosophy on what I'd be looking for now. I'm not really thinking wide receiver. I think there's so much value at the Giants' other priorities. A-Train, I'll repeat one more time that for me, I might not even take a receiver with one of the 2 7th-round picks. I might just say, you know what? Just wait for the undrafted rookie free agents and see what I could do there. Remember, too, that's how they got Bryce Ford Wheaton a couple of years ago, who at 6'3", 6'4", and ran in the 4.4s, with really good production. I know he had some dropsies in school, but I still don't understand how he dropped all the way out of the draft. That's what happens. There's so many of those guys. Every team cannot scout every single one of them. And so you pick up a guy like that. Now, Bryce Ford Wheaton was going to make this team 2 years ago as one of the receivers and as a special teamer. But he was going to make the team. And then, of course, his knee. So he winds up IRing as a rookie, worked his butt off, and I mean worked his butt off. Came back last year. We know after an ACL what happens, right? It usually, takes you some time. And so he comes back last year, and it turns out he moves into one of the lead roles on the special teams coverage units, which was great. And I think he's an asset to this team, and I certainly am looking forward to seeing him play again in 2025 in that role as a special teams coverage guy. The question, though, becomes for Bryce Ford Wheaton, can he also become part of the rotation in the wide receiver room? Now, that's a whole nother story. He's got the skyscraping height. He's got the length. He certainly had the speed, but can he restore his full speed capabilities in 2025 so that the Giants feel they can make him part of the receiving corps and not just have him as a special teams player? I don't know that. Now, you guys are also aware the Giants did, dip into free agency too, but not necessarily speed there. Oh, we're going to sneak in another comment or two. In fact, you know what? We're just about touching 1,500 live views. If I can get a couple more people to just we went back down to 1,495. I was going to say I'd even sit tight with you for a couple of more comments if we could get that sucker up to 1,500. Christine says, fantastic as always, and I appreciate you, Christine. It's a labor of love. 3-hour nap last night, and by the way, we have now eclipsed 1,500 live views on the program this morning. I kind of hoped that you guys would like this show because, after all, first round ended late last night. Didn't know how many of you would stay up, how many of you might go to sleep, or even if you did stay up, a lot of the overnight stuff, there's not a lot of the meat and potatoes kind of talk about this. And I knew this morning with the morning shows, Again, there's a lot of other league-wide stuff, a lot of entertainment value. I wanted to just stick to basically, hey, you're Giants fans. You want to get up in the morning. You want to talk about the Giants. You want to react. You want to comment. You want to find out. Everybody's curious about what they're going to do the rest of the way. So I took a chance. We experimented. We did this early morning show starting at 8 a.m. earlier this morning, New York time. And I would say it has been a success. And I thank every one of you for that. Here's J-Rock 13. P-Dot, do you think Alfred Collins will be there at 65? Oh, please, J-Rock. Please get Alfred Collins to last to 65. For those of you who don't know, let me pull up my notes on Alfred Collins, okay? Because this is why, sometimes you fall in love with players at certain spots and you really want them. Alfred Collins, okay. 6'4", 332-pound nose tackle, a plugger, an absolute big-bodied individual who drops the wood on people. I wrote down when I looked at his tape, impressed with his power, his length, and his shedding ability. Think about this. You guys have watched Dexter Lawrence now for the better part of a half a dozen plus years. Big, powerful, and sheds. Think about this. I don't want to compare the guy, but I want to say he's that style of player. And he's got those kinds of physical characteristics. Alfred Collins, Texas, would love for him to be there at 65. I don't think he's going to make it, but I would love it. What you wanted to watch out for and where he's going to have to improve his balance a little bit. Big man like that sometimes, obviously, can get knocked off his equilibrium. Did play high a little bit sometimes. And also wasn't necessarily quick on the get off at the snap. Dexter Lawrence, what makes him so unique and so special and just such a one-of-a-kind individual is that he has a very quick reaction, especially for a huge condominium of a man off of the snap to just fire out and release and explode. Collins is, not that explosive at the snap. Again, that's why he won't be a first-round pick, and that's why Dexter Lawrence is so special and so unique at what he does. But Alfred Collins has a lot of Dexter Lawrence's characteristics. And my goodness, I think he has been chowing down and eating those meat and potatoes and getting that protein together, playing in Texas. They certainly fed him well. And yes, Alfred Collins at 65, as I sit here right now, I'm willing to tell you guys that would be the guy I would target for the Giants, but I don't think he's going to be there, Jay. As does happen many times, the guys that I want just wind up getting scapped up. In this case, I don't think it's realistic to expect him to be there at 65. Honestly, I don't. But I don't know if you were with us a little earlier, and here I am going a little bit over. I'll take it to 10:45. How about that? I'll go 7 more minutes to make it nice and even and cut it off at 10:45. We can give you some names here, some other guys. If Collins is not there at 65, okay, Darius Alexander of Toledo would be a strong, again, not as big necessarily as Collins. Collins is he's a horse, okay? But Alexander, terrific defensive tackle prospect out of Toledo. He could be a 65. TJ Sanders out of South Carolina, another guy, we're talking, 6'3"-ish, over 300 pounds. I mean, they're not small by any stretch. But, when I talk Dexter Lawrence type, I'm talking 330, 340. Those guys, if you really wanted one of those guys, okay, you got to be looking at Collins. You'd be looking at Deion Walker out of Kentucky. He's another one. But I think Deion Walker probably is around later. I'm thinking 105 for Deion Walker instead of 65. And I also mentioned Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. I would suspect he might be at 105, not necessarily at 65. But those would be, and there were others too. But these are just a couple of guys who I kind of took a fancy to, either because I met them at the combine and I saw something there that really gave me a boost for them. I did video work on all the guys, and I kind of put little stars next to guys I was preferential to. But then also at the combine, I gathered intel and then obviously firsthand conversation during the media sessions with some of these players, and that stuff does matter. It does matter. There are some players, believe it or not, you see their measurements on paper, but then when you see them in person, it's like, well, wait a minute. He's not as thick as I thought he would be, or his frame is a little bit slight. And you start to wonder, because the eye test is true, especially at certain positions. The eye test does mean something. So that's why they always say that, you want to meet the guy in person. Anyway, JRock13 says, I'm so for continuing to build that D-line. Big Blue Wrecking Crew vibes. Jay, you're throwing me back to the days of Carl Banks and Lawrence Taylor and Harry Carson and Gary Reasons. Brian Kelly before that. The Big Blue Wrecking Crew. Wow. I haven't heard that name in a while. And you know what, J-Rock? Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that's part of the problem why the Giants haven't won a whole lot of games in the last several years. Playoffs in 2016, playoffs in 2022. But some really rough years in between. And the nickname of the Big Blue Wrecking Crew hasn't really applied. Even though in several of those years, they had really some terrific players on defense. We've talked about some of them. Landon Collins was terrific. Adoree Jackson had some really great years. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Blake Martinez had a couple of, one really terrific year at middle linebacker. So, there have been some legitimate, really terrific players. Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, right? It's terrific there in the secondary, and Janoris Jenkins. They've had some really terrific players over the course of the last dozen years or so. There's no doubt on defense. But the unit as a whole, they haven't really, dropped the hammer on people. They haven't been that dominant force that they once were some years ago. They didn't necessarily have enough of headache guys that made them a headache unit. I remember George Young many years ago, the Hall of Fame Giants GM, back in the 80s when Bill Parcells was the head coach. George used to say he wanted to know that when teams came into the old Meadowlands, the old Giants Stadium, and that hard AstroTurf field, he wanted those teams, when they came in off the bus and that cold and bitter, windy Meadowlands air, he wanted them to know that they were going to be in for a long day, that the Giants' defense was going to batter and bruise them. He wanted them thinking about that, so that when they got off the bus, they were already losing some of their focus, because they knew it was going to be a long day of taking a battering from that defense. and taking a battering from that offensive line. George always talked about the psychology of those things. And even Coach Parcells would say the psychology of results. It can really change a lot about what happens in terms of your performance, your mentality, and your frame of mind. J-Rock says yes. Well, J-Rock, thanks for bringing up the Big Blue Wrecking Crew. We're over 1,500 strong on this live stream, but folks, the voice is wearing out a little bit. I will tell you this. Later on today, the Giants make their pick tonight, and I'll just review this very quickly as we say goodbye. They are no picks in the second round because of the trade for Jackson Dart. They pick number 1 in round 3, which is 65 overall. And that is the only pick they have as of right now. They also have picks 105, third pick in the 4th round, pick number 154, which is pick number 16 in the 5th round, pick number 219, which is pick number 3 in round 7, and pick 246, which is pick number 30 in round 7. And Tremaine Young says, can they move up to get more picks? No, Tremaine, I just don't think it's realistic. I just don't. They don't have enough collateral in this draft to do that. And I don't believe that Joe Schoen is going to be looking to part with any more of his 2026 picks to do that. It's possible. I suspect it's highly unlikely. He already gave up his 3 from next year, his 3rd rounder in the Dart trade. So I think this is probably pretty much what you're going to have unless he maneuvers something small in the 3rd day, which is tomorrow. Starts at 12 o'clock, by the way, Eastern time. That would be with round 4 starting tomorrow. I would say he's not probably going to move his 105, I don't think. That would be the only one that he could use if he wanted to move down. But it would be pointless, I think, to do that. Because now you're starting to get into the boundary of where the draft, starts to get a little less juicy, right? A little less juicy. I think 105 is still a very sweet pick, as I say and have said many times this week, in the heart of the beefsteak tomato. So that's kind of how I feel on that. Tremaine Young, so glad you kind of snuck in there at the very end. Where else can you find us? Well, we're going to be back here with the Big Blue Breakdown, not necessarily a live show, but, Tremaine says, let me see here. Hold on. You got one more? Oh, he's asking about why did Shedeur Sanders drop out of the 1st round? Well, Tremaine, we've already gone through that. Simply put, different flavors, right, for different folks. Sanders has a specific skill set that works better in some systems than it does others. That in itself would have whittled down the amount of teams that would have wanted him. Then you've got to say, well, which teams have other needs of those? And then of those, which teams had quarterback depth that they just didn't need to do it. It's no surprise to me, to be frank with you, that Sanders did not make it into the 1st round. Again, my personal opinion is that I would not have taken him. I did not think that his skill set really fit very well with the team that I would have constructed or what the Giants roster has right now. So that's probably the best answer that I can give you. Again, so what do we want to tell you about what we're going to be doing the rest of the week? Well, I'll be over on Giants.com, and we're going to be doing a reaction live show right after the Giants make their pick tonight at 65 or whenever that pick turns out to be. We'll be doing that. We'll also give you a little bit of taped reaction tomorrow morning or maybe even later tonight here on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Then, of course, tomorrow on, no, not tomorrow, today. I'm losing track of the days. Today's Friday, folks. So tonight I do invite you, if you're local here in New York, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on MSG Networks. It will be the Giants press conference draft edition show. I co-hosted with Sean O'Hara, half hour tonight, 6:30 p.m. MSG Networks in New York. Half hour of all the information that you could want on both Abdul Carter, including an interview with him in Green Bay, and, of course, Jackson Dart. So those are the things in the next 24 hours you can look for if you're trying to catch me down the line. I've been here now for, wow, it's almost 3 hours. We experimented with this morning show, Breakfast and Football, and you guys have made it a success. I thank you so much for joining us on this special draft reaction show to the first round of what the New York Giants did here in 2025. Folks, we'll see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe. We enjoy having your participation each and every show. I'm Paul Dottino. So long, everybody.